Gurma, good Laska here. Taoiseach, I want to raise with you the lack of services for neurology patients. But before I begin, I want to acknowledge the great work that has been done by an advocate and indeed a patient of neurology herself, Rosie Mangan from Offaly. Rosie attends hospital, has to travel to Dublin 4 times a week. She's an advocate, as I say, and launched a campaign, Right to Rehabilitation. I want to acknowledge that lady's great work, and I'm sure you're aware of some of this work. And indeed, I'm sure you're aware that neurological conditions which affect the brain and spine are the leading cause of disability throughout the world and include many common conditions such as stroke, migraine, epilepsy and acquired brain injury, in addition to certain rare and genetic conditions. From the latest data to hand, we know that almost 24,000 Irish people are on a waiting list for a neurology outpatient appointment, and the number of people on the neurology outpatient waiting list is continuing to rise, with the number waiting more than 18 months increasing by 30% in the last year. In fact, there is also a shortfall of 100 neurology nurses in Ireland, based on official national and international guidelines relative to population. It is in that context that Patients Deserve Better campaign was launched. It is being promoted by the Neurological Alliance of Ireland, which is an umbrella group of non-profit organisations advocating for the rights of 800,000 citizens living with a neurological condition. Today, however, I want to focus on one particular ask, and that is the need for a dedicated community neuro-rehabilitation team for CHO Area 8, which includes my own constituency of Laois Offaly, where just 1 in every 2 neurology patients have access to services. A community neuro-rehabilitation team for CHO 8 was recommended in the implementation framework for the National Neuro Rehabilitation Strategy 2019 to 2021, but no team has been funded, despite implementation of this framework being a commitment in the current programme for government. These multidisciplinary teams provide access to key specialist supports, including physiotherapy, speech and language therapy, neuropsychology and occupational therapy for people living with a range of neurological conditions, including acquired brain injury, Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis and rare neurological conditions such as motor neuron disease and Huntington's disease. We can only imagine what a deficit in services means for those directly affected by such a diagnosis, but for their families and loved ones who have to travel to St James's in Dublin 3 or 4 times a week because there are no local services is simply appalling. Taoiseach, will you work with the Minister for Health to commit to the delivery and the prioritisation of a neuro-rehabilitation team for Laois Offaly and the wider CHO 8 area, please?
Thanks, Deputy. I want to thank the Deputy for raising this very important issue of neurology services generally, and particularly in CHO Area 8 and in Laois Offaly. It is a very specific question about a specific branch of medicine and your own part of the country, which is the Midlands. And I don't have a detailed note on it right now, but I will try and get you more information in writing this week or next. What I can say in broader terms is that we acknowledge that neurology services are nowhere near at the standard that they should be. The budget for this year does provide additional funding for community-based neuro rehab teams. I'm not sure if CHO8 will be one of those, but we'll try to come back to you with more information over the next couple of days. One of the issues that we have had a difficulty with is recruiting consultant neurologists around the country, and that has caused waiting lists to rise in some parts of the country. We're now at the point where we have a new consultant contract which is being offered. I understand the IMO is going to ballot their members on that. The IHCA will survey their members on it, and we hope to be in a position to offer that in a matter of weeks. And it is a very attractive offer financially. It also requires consultants to phase out private practice in public hospitals, committing to our public health system, and also amends working practices so that we can get more value and make sure that more patients get seen. And I really think that is a significant reform that Minister Donnelly has pretty much got over the line and will bring us a big way towards achieving the vision in the Sláinte Care report. We're also training more advanced nurse practitioners, and as somebody who's worked in the health service, I know the excellent work that advanced nurse practitioners do, and the more of them we can train, the better. The same thing goes for clinical nurse specialists. Finally, I just would like to mention to the House, while we don't have the exact figures yet, I do think we are in a position to say that we are now making progress in terms of waiting lists overall. Maybe not every specialty, certainly not every specialty, and certainly not in all parts of the country. But as the House will know, in the Sláinte Care report, we more or less said that nobody should be waiting more than 3 months for a procedure or to see a specialist. We all acknowledge there will always be people waiting a few weeks, but we don't think that anyone should be waiting more than 3 months or so to see a specialist or to have a particular procedure done. And there are Sláinte Care targets in that regard, and the end-of-year figures for 2022 would indicate that the number of people waiting more than that 3-month benchmark, that Sláinte Care benchmark, has fallen by somewhere between 4 and 10%. And that's against a backdrop where we see waiting lists rise north of the border, rise in Britain, rise across the world, against a backdrop of COVID and against the backdrop of a cyber attack. I think it does show that we're finally making some meaningful progress in terms of waiting lists, and we intend to build on that this year.
Thank you, Las Corla. Taoiseach, I thank you for your reply, and I do want to acknowledge also the work done by Senator Victor Boyhan, who actually brought forward an excellent motion on this very issue in the Seanad. There is cross-party support, and I know TDs in all parties, as I said, have raised this, as have senators. So it's something that has to be got to grips with. You did mention in terms of the budget that it does provide for funding for neuro-rehabilitation teams. Now, in the case of CH08, where Laois Offaly is, it's certainly without doubt one of the worst. It has to be prioritised because patients are being failed. If there's only 1 in every 2 patients getting access to a service, and particularly, when it involves a serious condition, such as a neurological condition, it has to be prioritised. So I would stress to you that that team needs to be delivered in Laois Offaly and the wider CH08 area. I acknowledge the fact that approximately 3,230 additional neurology outpatient appointments were due to be delivered by 2022 through once-off funding. But the problem with once-off funding is it doesn't provide a patient pathway. It's not long-term, it's not consistent, and what we need here is long-term vision and consistency.
Thanks again, Deputy. I'm advised that we have funding this year for 23 neuro rehab nurses, and they would be permanent positions, not once-off. As I mentioned in my earlier reply, we have a new consultant contract that is being offered. I hope the bodies that represent doctors will accept that, and I think it will allow us to really make some significant steps forward in terms of retaining specialists and hiring specialists in neurology and other areas over the next couple of years. In relation to CHO Area 8, which I appreciate covers Laois Offaly, and that's the priority of your question, I don't have a detailed note on that here. I don't want to give you information that mightn't be correct, but we'll correspond with you over the course of the next week and give you any more information that we can.